Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, the CEO of Digitoral Media Productions speaks on their passion for bringing stories to life through the lens of captivating visuals. Then, founder and CEO of the Trip Foundation, along with the founder and principal of South Bronx Academy for Applied Media, speaks on the importance of giving kids a chance to explore the world. After that, we looked back at an interview with a registered dietitian for Consumer Reports to discuss how you can help teach your kids to make healthy choices for school lunch. And finally, a Senior Data and Policy Analyst for Immigration Research Initiative speaks on the report about the vendors in New York. So stay tuned, all this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hello everyone, I'm Kibin Alleyne and today is Tuesday, November 12th. You are now watching Open, a program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. George Williams is a versatile media expert with a wealth of experience in shooting interview and documentary videos. Proficient in video, lighting, audio, and interviewing subjects, George founded Digitoral Media Productions, committing to deliver high-quality productions that leave a lasting impact. Recently, he was a recipient of the SBS NYC Funds Finder program. George Williams now joins us in studio to share more details. George, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about Digitoral Media Productions?
So Digitoral Media Productions is a combination of two kind of areas. One, I grew up with a IT background. Secondly, I've also lived in the South Bronx for all of my life, and I looked and saw how the South Bronx was changing, and there were so many neighborhoods and stories that were being told, and I wanted to capture some of these stories. Plus, at the same time, what began to happen was social media began to, evolve, and there were a lot of positive and also negative things that were happening in social media, and I wanted to create positive stories. So hence, digital and oral together, Digitoral Media, and there you have it.
Wow. Now, can you just tell us a little bit more about what the organization provides and gives to those that, encounter?
So we really specialize in interviewing and mini docs and now also podcasts. We do that because that's the idea of really capturing people's stories and ideas and things like music and things like history of the Bronx and neighborhoods that are changing. And so we really specialize in those three, but we'll also do photography and events when, the need calls for that.
Now, something you kind of mentioned the past and how the Bronx is changing. And when I look at society and how it's changing, so many of us now kind of have access or a little bit more access to these tools so that we can kind of share our own stories, just talk about the things that we want to talk about. But I understand things weren't always like that, not even 10 years ago. So I'm curious to know what helped you get started and what inspired you to go, especially during a time where, just resources in media weren't always as available.
Yeah, that's true. Well, thinking back, again, I started as an IT tech, and a lot of us were looking at the IT space and saying, okay, this is great, that's great. A lot of us worked in what we call messaging technology. So when you look at things like AOL, email system of the past, a lot of us worked on those systems. And when YouTube came about, we all looked at that as the prime and messaging system where you could take a little piece of a video and actually shoot it around the world. And we knew that was going to be something big. So a lot of us invested in, our time into learning about YouTube, and we just knew it would take off. And now you have YouTube, you have Netflix. So back then, yeah, cameras were very expensive, and you purchased what you could afford, or what you did was you worked with an organization such as BronxNet to gain access to the cameras. And we did it until, we could do better.
That's amazing. Now, what's also amazing that you were recently awarded a fund through the NYC Department of Small Business Services. Can you tell me a little bit more about that accomplishment?
So that's actually in Small Business Services Funds Finder. And to really, describe it, imagine, you were looking for a job, and, you could run around and go anywhere and say, okay, are you guys hiring? Are you guys hiring? But then there's technology such as Indeed, and you can put your information in Indeed and your resume, and the actual people who are looking to hire actually come to you. Well, that's the same thing as Fund Finder. You put your business information in Fund Finder, and the actual funders now can get an indication that your company is looking for funds, and they will actually reach out to you with a form and an application. You'll fill that out, and you'll give them all the information you need to actually qualify for funding. So you no longer have to run around to bank A, bank B, bank C, and so forth like that. And we were able to do it. We had all our ducks in a row, all our documentation set up, and it took a while, but it was well worth it.
Now, can you explain, what this could mean for a lot of organizations that are running in the Bronx? A lot of people have amazing ideas, but they don't always have the funds to help kind of go forward with those ideas. So can you explain how helpful this was, and how this could be, a life-saving organization or a life-saving tool for an organization?
So it's really important to have your information, set up so you can be fundable. But the beauty of it is, a lot of us, we have credit cards, and we can go out and use our credit cards for 29.99%. But another thing about the Fund Finder is that they actually give you a rate of between 8 and, let's say, 10%. So that is actually life changing when it comes to a small business that is watching every dollar. You're now not only do you get an affordable loan, but you also get an affordable loan at a ridiculous rate where you couldn't otherwise be able to afford it using a credit card.
Right. Now, I want to take a moment to discuss, with all of the funding that you have and the resources, what you use those resources for, and it's to kind of amplify the voices of people in the Bronx. Can you just explain? We all know that the Bronx has kind of this reputation, and people have their preconceived ideas about the Bronx. Why was it so important for you to kind of step in there and kind of amplify the voices that aren't usually heard?
So I was watching the Bronx change, where the neighborhoods that I was accustomed to were literally changing before our eyes. People were moving out. Things were getting a little expensive, and people were moving either down south, Texas, out west. And there was one particular neighborhood that I saw, and I just said, it'd be great to document this neighborhood. I think the most important thing that I saw was, let's capture things before they move, so we can kind of preserve that history.
Well, that's amazing. And then, where we are today, things are rapidly changing in the Bronx. The community is often changing. How do you hope, what you've recorded before kind of shows, about the past of the Bronx and where we're heading towards our future?
Well, the plan is to create enough content so, there could be a Bronx archive in the future. I know the Bronx has already created a hip hop museum, so perhaps, some of the content can be used there in, for future generations, or, students to actually see what the Bronx was like, or hear what the Bronx was like, and the people who, came before them, what did they do? How did they enjoy the Bronx?
Now, I love that you mentioned hip hop because one, you can't talk about the Bronx history without talking about
Right.
hip hop. But I understand that one of your projects traces hip hop history via the Lambert houses in the West Farms neighborhood. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Okay, so this is a very interesting project. It came about, I was shooting a party. I met a gentleman named Hercules Bradley. He said, hey, I have a project, and, just hired me to shoot some footage. At the time, I had older cameras. And he introduced me to the project where it's called the Lambert House documentary, where if many of us go to the Bronx Zoo and there's several entrances, but one of the entrances towards the south of the Bronx Zoo, in order to get to it, you pass what we call Lambert houses, and there are so many uh, hip hop historians and founders that have grew up in that development. And it just so happens he wanted to do this project because Lambert is actually being torn down bit by bit and replaced by 18-story apartment buildings. And he thought it would be a great idea before it was all gone um, to do two things: record the changes as he takes footage of the buildings, and also record the people who lived in the buildings and what the building meant to them and what they were doing at the time that they lived in the building. And it is just phenomenal.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that because I didn't even know that was happening in the Bronx. So thank you for sharing that. I also want to take a moment to highlight, you know, your contribution or, just being a part of the BronxNet team and family. I understand that you've worked with Gary Axelbank, you've taken classes. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience, with BronxNet and how it's helped you in any way?
Well, it's been great. I originally became certified with BronxNet probably around 2015, and I recently recertified. But when you approach media, media is the unknown. Nobody, you really don't know, what the components are and so forth like that, and what it takes to actually successfully create a production. So through the BronxNet certification, we were able to learn about all of these lights that you see here, all the TVs, the control rooms, every aspect of media in order to successfully create a production. So without that, I have no doubt, unless of course I went to college for it, which, fortunately I did it, unless I did, I would not know. So, and the nice thing about it is it is affordable. So anyone can come and get a certification in media production here at BronxNet.
And I love that you mentioned that, whatever path you take, there's an option for you to learn about this because
Right.
our world is changing. We are kind of being delved further into the world of media. So I think that's amazing. And, with that, if you could give any advice to people who are looking to start their own journey into the world of media production, what would it be?
So my advice would be start now. Don't wait. Don't go through analysis paralysis and kind of analyze and don't do anything. Start now. What you will create, it may not be ideal where you say, oh, I love it, but it will get better. And it gets better after time after time. And it takes a while. It takes a while to really, learn what good media is because it's a psychological thing also. People expect a certain type of media when they see it, a certain type of professionalism, and you will develop it in time.
Well, with that, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit more about your expertise. And, in the beginning, I said how amazing you were.
Thank you.
But I love that you talked about that there were things that you didn't know and that you had to learn about it because, especially here at BronxNet, what we're really advocate for is the education and learning more about media. So with that, again, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit more about your journey and your organization.
Thank you very much.
To learn more about the work Digitoral Media Production does, please go to their website at digitalmedia.com. Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open right after this.
Hey, creative family, my name is Timothy Coleman, and I'm the Director of Education here at BronxNet. And I'm standing in BronxNet's Media and Technology Studios in the South Bronx, because I want to let you know about an amazing program that we're bringing back that highlights the creativity of community members just like you. Emerging Media Makers is a show that introduces you to BronxNet's certified producers. They've taken a step in their creative journey by enrolling in BronxNet's media training classes. On this show, you'll get to see the many ways that our certified producers have created a space that's all their own. Emerging Media Makers, your passion lives here.
Welcome back. The TRIP Foundation aims to expose students in underserved communities to a world beyond their own, to broaden their intellectual and cultural horizons, and to show them what it truly means to become a global citizen. Joining me now to discuss the work of the organization is Lidj Lewis, the founder and CEO of the TRIP Foundation, and Dr. Roshone Ault Lee, founder and principal of South Bronx Academy for Applied Media /MS 296. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, Lidj, can you tell me a little bit more about how you came up with the idea to start the TRIP Foundation?
Absolutely. So I taught in the Bronx, at a high school in the Bronx for about 11 years or so, teaching government and economics and global history. And invariably, I saw instances where when it came to trips, some students just didn't have the capacity to financially pay for it. Couldn't afford the Broadway ticket, could not afford the expense of the overnight stay to Washington, D.C. to see the monuments, to go to the museums. Couldn't afford the ticket for Six Flags as part of the senior trip. So I would chip in, some of my family members would chip in, other teachers would chip in, but I asked myself, I said, well, if this is a problem just in my school, how pervasive is it elsewhere, not only in the New York region, but across the country? And that gave me the idea to start the TRIP Foundation, because I felt that every student should have the opportunity to experience what many of us take for granted. And so I put it on the shelf because when you're a teacher, obviously, you're teaching not only the classes, but you're planning day and night, you're grading papers on the weekend, and I just didn't have the bandwidth to launch it at the time. So when I retired in June of 23 from the New York City Department of Education, that gave me the opportunity to take it off the shelf, pull all of the infrastructure together, and launch it in September of 23 in time for the school year.
That's amazing. And with that, I just want to know, why is it so important to give children a chance to experience a world beyond the concrete jungle that is New York City?
Well, as you alluded to, a lot of kids don't get the opportunity, or rarely get the opportunity, to travel outside the neighborhood or the borough or the city in which they live to see what the world offers them. And why not? Why not them? I've traveled around the world, 4 out of the 7 continents, and anywhere from Paris to to Rome to London to the Caribbean islands, and I figured, well, children should have the same opportunity. And what it does for them is that, yes, it does broaden their intellectual horizons. They get the chance to meet new people, go to new places, experience different cultures, the food, the dance, and I think the more they do that, the more we have the potential to create a world that is more tolerant, that is more just and more open. So that was my mission at the time. That is our mission now, and hope to broaden that beyond perhaps the New York region that we're operating in at some point.
Now, Dr. Roshone, earlier this year, I understand that you helped lead a trip to South Korea. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes. So earlier this year, specifically in February, I collaborated with another school in my district, and we both have a Korean language program. We share the same teacher. And just a little bit of context, before the trip, when the teacher was hired, one of the things that I said is that we are going to South Korea. We're going to take some of our scholars, some of our families, and I was very happy to see that it did manifest. Now, when the trip began, before the trip, we used a framework actually that I author entitled the PRICE framework. So it stands for purpose, relevance, impact, conditions, and evidence. And because we knew it was very important, speaking of the focus of the TRIP Foundation, for example, to take students beyond their comfort zone. They're learning about the language. We want to make sure they're immersed in the culture. So when we set forth to plan, we used the framework as a foundation. So we thought about what is the purpose? Why do we want children to be exposed? And we highlighted that. Why is it relevant? Who will benefit? Why would it be worthwhile to take our scholars of the South Bronx and one parent or guardian with them, including staff members as well? And then we thought about the impact. So what will be the desired state when they return? What would they say? What are the conditions? That's where we got really granular, and the planning took off. And then evidence, when they got back, we identified like what would be the evidence that we would see to show this was a really great opportunity, and a lot of energy and time that we put into it. We wanted to make sure that we just did the best that we could for our students.
Now, just hearing this, I'm like in awe just because I'm like, whoa, like I could imagine that experience for a kid to be able to go somewhere they probably never dreamed they could go to. I could imagine it was amazing. How did you help children prepare emotionally, mentally to kind of maybe travel? Because I know for myself, I didn't even get on a plane for the first time until I was an adult. So how did you help these children kind of mentally and emotionally prepare for that?
Yes. So the great part about it is that they did their independent research, and we helped the teachers, the staff. We set up guidelines for them to research and say, we're going to South Korea, we're visiting these particular places, and they basically were able to identify how long the flight was, what might be some things that they can do during the flight, throughout the flight. And so they were able to own it. And their parents and guardians who accompanied them were involved in that process as well. So in order, at our school, our value proposition is empowering scholars by enriching their minds and illuminating their voices. So we were able to work with them to do the research, but then we really heard from them about how they were going to put measures in place to be really successful on the trip. And the final thing that I would say about that, we know that they were going into a place as far as the food would be totally different. So we had, through our Korean language program, the scholars tried out different types of foods. They identified what were their favorites. And so it wasn't totally shocking when they did arrive on the continent.
That's amazing. And can you just tell us a little bit more about the students at your school and just kind of give us a little bit more about the culture of the school?
Yes. So the South Bronx Academy for Applied Media, also called SBAM, is a dynamic place. It's a place where scholars, staff, parents, we come together. We're a true family. That's one of the foundational principles that I have, is to ensure that we all we coexist together in a place that ensures that we create these positive, phenomenal experiences for children. And I really enjoy our scholars because they bring a lot of ideas. They're not containers that we just pour into. They bring in their experiences. They have a lot to say about everything. And we just make sure we create the conditions for them to be successful. The school community, we are super excited. The staff comes every day. Parents, we have a great partnership. The district representation as well. We just really want children to leave SBAM just ready for the world, ready to go forward and be the positive force of change that they should.
Now, Lidj, can you tell us a little bit more about how schools can kind of have a similar experience where they give their, the children there an opportunity to travel abroad, and how can they, just get in contact with the organization to
Sure.
kind of take advantage of that?
Sure. Our model is pretty simple. Teachers come to us and tell us where they would like to go and what they would like to do. And that's how I got in touch with Dr. Lee here. I saw that they wanted to take this trip to South Korea. I said, wow, what a fascinating opportunity it would be for the kids. And so we funded their equipment and supplies that they needed for that trip. But generally speaking, teachers go on our website, they fill out the form, they send it in, we review it, myself and my board, we review it, and then we decide, whether to fund that excursion or not. And Dr. Lee isn't the only one who has come to us. We've had another school, the East Side Community High School on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. They took a trip to South Africa in May, and the kids had a wonderful time, life-changing experiences for them. We do local trips as well. A school in Yonkers wanted to take a trip to the fairgrounds in Queens for an automotive equipment show. We funded that as well. So whatever the needs are, we evaluate, and then we decide, whether we will actually work with the school.
That's amazing. I love to hear that kids are traveling abroad and kind of like taking on these adventures. I think it's amazing. Can you explain, what maybe some of the benefits for children to kind of go on those type of adventures and kind of explore the world beyond, what they're used to?
Sure, and I'm sure Dr. Lee can attest to this. When kids return, they have a new sense of agency, self-confidence. They see themselves in a different light. Our motto is that we want to be able for kids to not only understand that they are citizens of their own country, but also citizens of the world, that they can go anywhere, do anything. If they can be it, if they can see it, they can be it, right? That's the message that we want to send, and that's what we want our kids to get out of this.
That's amazing. And did you want to expand on that in any way?
And just to expand a little bit, it's the greater appreciation for where they're from as well, and really making connections to culturally and seeing that we might be apart by water, or we're in a different continent, but we are people, and we can be, we can coexist together even beyond visiting the country, and they still have some connections in South Korea, for example, where our scholars traveled earlier this year.
Wow, that's amazing. I love to hear that. Now, I understand there's also an effort to kind of bring college into this. Can you tell me a little bit more about the college tours?
Sure. One of our programs is UCAN/College Tours, and we know that many schools want to take their students to visit universities within the area. So there is another school, just to give you an example, that wants to take their students on a tour of HBCUs. Historically black colleges and universities. Howard University, Morgan State, Delaware State, and Lincoln University are four of the schools that the school wants to take their students on a trip to. And also, other schools within the region, state schools, private schools, and so forth. But when students go on these trips to colleges and universities, particularly if they're first generation or potentially first generation students, it shows them, again, what's possible, and they come back with the feelings, oh wow, I think I can do this, where they may not have thought about going to college at all previously, but they get a taste of what college life is like, what college expects of them, and the work that they have to put into it as well.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for joining us and sharing this amazing organization and, telling us a little bit more about the stories that these children were able to go on. I remember as a kid going on like a camping trip for the first time, and I still think about it as an adult. So I'm sure, these trips are having a lasting impact on these kids that they'll remember, when they're well into their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So with that, again, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing and, coming on the show to talk about how you're making an impact.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Please go to their website at thetripfoundation.org to learn more. Stay tuned. We have more open for you right after this.
19.7% of Bronxites currently experience food insecurity. Meanwhile, instead of these nice, colorful foods, this is the best food that they have access to. If this sounds like you, there are a bunch of resources to get healthy food for free or cheap. If you want to help, you might consider donating or volunteering in one of these places. Community fridges like this one are all over the city and allow New Yorkers to conveniently donate extra food to people who might need it. Go to this link and find your nearest one. Food banks and pop-up events like these provide millions of healthy meals to families in need. These organizations are distributing meals to Bronxites as we speak and are always accepting donations and volunteers.
What's up, creative family? Discover your voice with BronxNet community media classes. Are you ready to bring your ideas to life? At BronxNet, we offer television production classes for community members ages 18 and over, empowering you to share your vision with the world. Get certified in field production, in-studio production, and our new exciting addition, podcast production. Once certified, you can create your own show to air on one of our 6 TV channels. It all starts with our free Unleash Your Ideas Masterclass, designed to help you plan your show idea and set you up for success on your production journey. This class is offered at the beginning of each month for your convenience. Our dedicated BronxNet team is here to support, encourage, and uplift you every step of the way. Join us and become a part of the creative force that engages and inspires the Bronx community and beyond. Sign up today and start your media journey with BronxNet. Visit bronxnet.org/education to learn more and register. Let's create something amazing together.
Welcome back. We'd like to take this moment to look back at an interview with Amy Keating, a registered dietitian for Consumer Reports, to discuss how you can help teach your kids to make healthy choices for school lunch. Let's take a look. Now this, I would say, is probably one of my favorite things to talk about because I'm always on the hunt to, be healthier and eat right. So with that being said, people often find eating healthy to be a challenge. What are some healthy and easy options for parents who are packing lunches, for their kids?
Well, I think the first thing to keep in mind is one of my favorite topics too, is that getting your kids involved in this process is going to set you up for a lot more success than if you're doing it totally on your own. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, you need a little bit of preparation, which you can do early in the week, and talk to your kids about preferences, take your kids grocery shopping, get them involved. It's a skill, there'll be their introduction to food preparation. So it's a great skill to have. And basically, you just want to make sure you hit on the major food groups. So you want to make sure you're choosing some vegetable, fruit, whole grain, a protein source. And there's plenty of options. Again, and the driver should be what your child prefers. But with vegetables, it can be as easy as cutting up vegetables on a Sunday for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday's lunches. It could be a thermos of vegetable soup. Some kids really like, some, interest and excitement to their lunch. So that could work. For fruit, I'd pick something handheld, or like a handful of grapes, a slice of oranges, sometimes like a whole orange or a whole apple, to try to finish that while you're watching children line up for recess. I mean, it can be pretty daunting for a child. And sometimes that's when the apple comes home half eaten or the orange is thrown away. So you want to think about the amount of time your children have, making it interesting, making it exciting. For your protein sources, try less reliance on packaged processed meats and think about maybe some leftover chicken that you have the night before that would really work well in a wrap, or maybe even mixed with some whole grains in a bento box. So there's lots of different options that you can do with protein beyond packaged processed meat. You can do hummus, eggs, even Greek yogurt counts as a protein. So again, the driver should be the preference, and it should be fun and engaging with your child.
I think that's pretty amazing. Now, I could speak for myself, but I'm sure there's a lot of kids who relate to this. What can you do if you have picky eaters who may struggle with, maybe eating their vegetables, or maybe they don't want to eat fruit and they're kind of leaning more towards chips or things like that?
You cut out, but I think I got most of the question. I mean, it's just basically, not wanting to eat the vegetables. Sometimes pairing a vegetable with a food they like like peanut butter, taking even, apple slices or celery and pairing them together in a combination. Uh, what's worked with my children is seeing what their friends like, saying, "Hey, are you curious? Johnny's eating broccoli. You've never tried it. He's one of your best friends. It's one of his favorite vegetables." So sometimes seeing what's going on in the cafeteria and asking them, "Hey, are you curious about anything? Oh, well, maybe I'm afraid to try it." But just being patient and understanding that it is going to be a process. Um, but um, you know, letting them try things, and if they don't like it, you've got to just accept that and you know hold the line.
Now, what role does teaching children about making healthy food choices play in their overall development?
Well, I mean, so much in terms of just learning readiness and really like their quality of life. They want to be playing sports. They want to be, have active lives. So in general, just food is health. And when you think about setting yourself up in terms of your uh, dietary preferences, your healthy eating, and all that can lead to in terms of health later on. I mean, we do know that, like, we parents so closely and even students so closely look at their grades and if they made the team. But there are also ways to look at your diet, and for years we've been calculating the healthy eating index and looking at the diets of Americans, and younger kids 2 to 4 on a scale of 0 to 100 on this healthy eating scale are about 60, 65. When they get into elementary school, high school, those numbers drop to about 50, and they're lacking in things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains. They're kind of, making choices that are just much more convenient, or eating too much, highly processed foods, sugar sweetened beverages. So, really, I mean, I would argue that as we get ready for the school year, arithmetic, spelling, PE, athletics, and healthy eating, it is a priority, and it is a huge learning opportunity, and it's going to set people up for just such a better quality of life.
Now, because you talked about convenience and juices and all of these things, that leads into my next question about lunch kits like Lunchables. Now, I know when I was a kid, I loved Lunchables. I know a lot of kids love that now, but can you tell me a little bit more about kits like Lunchables? Are they actually healthy or not? And I understand that Consumer Reports actually tested or did some research on that. So can you tell us what you found?
Yeah, I mean, we looked into Lunchables last year because we were surprised that Kraft tweaked the Lunchables just enough so that they would qualify to fit into a national school lunch program menu. And we feel they're not the healthiest choice, and you can read all about it on consumerreports.org. But basically, I mean, these kits are a big opportunity for the food industry to get themselves into the National School Lunch Program or into the hands of kids in their sack lunches. But really, they're heavily processed. A lot of them revolve around packaged processed meats, which we know from a lot of observational studies increases your risk for cardiovascular disease, cancer. Um, they're just, they're highly processed. They have the trifecta of high sodium foods with crackers, cheese, processed meat. And we took a closer look at them and found that Lunchables and other similar lunch kits have high amounts of sodium, probably about 500 to 900 milligrams per package. For a small amount of food, it's only about 2 to 4 ounces. And that could be up to about half of your daily limit that a child should have for sodium. And it's not a lot of food. We also, my colleagues in the food safety area, also are monitoring lots of processed packaged foods and even natural foods for heavy metals, things like lead and cadmium, which are natural elements of the earth's crust, but also can make it into these products through processing. And we did find levels of contaminants in these packaged lunch kits that were somewhat concerning. There aren't national federal standards for um, things like lead, but we did look at the California standards and their maximum allowable dose per day, and we found that some of them were up to about 50% when you consider a child's diet. When you consider that a child is relatively smaller in stature, so when you consume things, your body is going to take a little bit bigger of a hit for that, and also that heavy metals are, it's over time, it's cumulative. So less is definitely more. So we did see a little bit of that, and it's really, the sodium is really problematic as well, and just that it's not really setting people up for and children up for eating and making choices that are whole healthy foods. And eating whole healthy foods um, doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, if you have a knife and a cutting board, you can do wonders with real produce and real, proteins that you find in the grocery store.
With that being said, what should parents do when they do get to that supermarket and they are tempted to kind of grab the most convenient thing, or maybe they don't know how to read nutrition labels or they struggle with that? What are some tips you would give a parent who's, just needs that extra boost or that extra help when navigating a supermarket?
Yeah, well, you were mentioning juice and packaged foods, and there are a lot of them. First of all, just from a budget standpoint, I mean, buying a lot of prepackaged single serve items generally are going to come along, are going to be more highly processed and potentially have more sodium and added sugars. So when you can prep some of that food yourself, you'll save some money and you'll probably be better off in terms of sodium and added sugars. And then when you're looking at labels, I mean, it is very confusing. It's a landmine. We have lots of information on our website. I really would encourage parents to look for our information on how to read food labels. But just in terms of juice, juice alone, when you see the packages, the front of package of juice or any foods is really could potentially lead you down the wrong path. You'll see juice products, they'll have big, colorful pieces of fruit on the front of the juice package. That doesn't necessarily reflect what's in the product. That could just be the imagery used for the natural or artificial flavor that's added. So don't look at the images of the fruit to determine. By law, all juice and juice drinks have to list the percent juice that's in the container. So you want to look for 100% juice. And if you see a juice drink or juice cocktail, that should tip you off that you may be getting less juice and you're probably getting more added sugars. And added sugars in sugar sweetened beverages is one of the top sources for kids. So if you look on the label, you'll see, wow, this product that I thought was so healthy and it's bright orange and it's got oranges and grapefruits on the front. It only has 5% juice when I just turn that package sideways. So you have to take a look at again, the nutrition facts panel. And you don't need a science degree to look at it. You really want to focus in on comparing two products with the nutrition facts panel, and probably at this point really focusing in on the problematic nutrients like added sugar, sodium, comparing two products, seeing what the difference is in those. Also looking for some nutrients. We don't always want to be avoiding. We want to be thinking about adding positive things to our diet. So looking at things like the percent daily value for the vitamins and minerals that are listed. The vitamins and minerals that are listed on the nutrition facts panel are the ones that Americans need more of. They can't fit them all. There are
Right.
dozens of vitamins and minerals, but they put 4 on there because those are the ones you want. So the higher they are, the better the choices, or dietary fiber. And then again, with ingredients, scan the ingredient list. If it's, a bunch of chemicals and things that you don't have in your cupboard and that you are not familiar with, you want to be looking for something that more resembles what you could make yourself.
Well, Amy, I want to thank you so much for joining us and really having this informative discussion. I know I'm going to be helped by this already, so thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having us.
You can learn more tips about packing a healthy lunch by reading Amy's article and the Consumer Reports website, which is on your screen below. Stay. Thank you to the team at Consumer Reports for always sharing these tips with our viewers. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Open after this. Welcome back. Immigration Research Initiative is a nonprofit looking at issues of economic, social, and cultural inclusion of immigrants in the United States. Their recent report, Street Vendors of New York, represents the approximately 23,000 street vendors that operate right here in New York City. Joining me now to discuss the report is the Senior Data and Policy Analyst for IRI, Dr. Anthony Capote. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Now, before we talk about the recent report about street vendors, can you tell me a little bit more about the overall mission of IRI?
Absolutely. So we're a nonpartisan research organization that's dedicated to understanding the economic outcomes that immigrants experience, what the economic contributions they make throughout the economy are, and also advocating for policies that make their lives just a little bit easier.
Now, I think it's so important that we're having this conversation in November because there's a lot of preconceived ideas about immigrants and what they add to our country, or, ideas that people have, about how they're impacting our country. Can you just explain, the benefit of having reports that shed light on the economic, social, and cultural inclusion of immigrants in the United States?
Well, I think there's just so much misinformation out there about immigrants, right? I think in a lot of different directions, right? Not only do a lot of people think that immigrants are working only in like low-wage jobs or on farms, but then there's so much misinformation about who immigrants are and where they come from. And so it's really important to have fact-based research and information about who immigrants are, where they're born, where they're coming from, how long they've been here, where they're working. And what I think a lot of people are really shocked to find in a lot of our reports is that they've already got immigrants in their daily life, right? In their workplace, in their family, in their home. A lot of them are hiring immigrants as domestic workers, right? And they don't even really think about themselves in that way. So it's really important to shed light on a population that is so often obfuscated in different parts of our daily life.
Now, I also want to mention the fact that when we talk about immigrants, we talk about it in this like grand idea of, how it impacts the entire United States. But I want to kind of, shine a light on, how they also impact our communities, our close-knit communities. I know we're going to talk about street vendors very soon, but can you talk about ways that immigrants also impact the communities, that we wake up in every morning, where we go get our groceries, things like that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't know when I first started this job, but immigrants are more likely than U.S.-born people to become business owners, only slightly so. And they're actually really likely to become what we call Main Street business owners. So those are businesses like grocery stores, gas stations, nail salons. So there's a really good chance that when you wake up on any given day and you go to one of these big storefronts that you rely on every week or every month, there's a really good chance that that business is owned by an immigrant, and that person is actively taking a part in your daily life in ways that you never really think of before.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I do think a lot of people don't often think about that. Like even getting your nails done, or going to the grocery store if you decide that you want fruit. Usually the people that have the fruit stands are people from another country. So I think that's such an amazing point just to kind of highlight. So thank you for sharing that. Now, I really want to talk about the report, Street Vendors of New York, or in New York. Can you tell me a little bit more about that report and, what inspired the creation of it?
Of course. So the Street Vendors Project, which is an advocacy organization in New York dedicated to making life just a little bit easier for street vendors, ran a survey of about 2,000 street vendors in 2020. And it was the biggest survey of street vendors ever done before. And they reached out to us and they asked us to help analyze the data and really get a sense of who street vendors were, what were they selling, where are they selling it, and really try to get, for the first time, a really accurate accounting of how many street vendors are actually operating in New York City. Because even though New Yorkers are so accustomed to street vendors, right? We all have like that street vendor that we always go to. For me, it's the halal guy right by Hunter College. Love him. He helped jumpstart my car one time. But even though we all see it as part of our daily lives, we know frighteningly little about them. And so we worked with the Street Vendors Project and with a statistician named Jonathan Auerbach to take our 2000 survey responses and extrapolate out, okay, how many street vendors are really operating in New York City? And that's where we got that 23,000 number. Was from that really intense extrapolation and sort of statistical analysis. And what we found, by and large, was that street vendors are really centralized in certain areas, but that most of them are immigrants. Most of them are doing this as their full-time job or as their primary source of income, and that many of them are also sort of facing a wide set of challenges that we can make a little easier.
Now, definitely, I want to talk about some of those challenges because, as you mentioned, even giving a little bit of a backstory, about, your favorite street vendor. So many of us are so used to seeing them. We may talk with them, have a laugh, but we don't really know what a lot of, street vendors are going through. What are some of the challenges that they're facing?
Well, one of the big challenges is that many street vendors, most street vendors are licensed, especially when we talk about mobile food vendors. They do have licenses, so they're licensed and able to sort of work with and sell food, but they don't have permits. And one of the main reasons for that is that the city has this sort of archaic cap on the number of licenses or on the number of permits that they can give out each year. And so as a result, it leaves these street vendors open to being harassed by the city, randomly being shut down, not being able to access any sort of resources because they don't have the paperwork necessary to protect themselves while they're on the job. And another challenge that they face is obviously access to bathrooms, right? Access to air conditioning when it's really hot, access to heat when it's really cold. So they face a lot of sort of classic challenges that we can all imagine that they're dealing with, but also a few challenges that I certainly wasn't thinking about before we worked on the report.
Now, I also want to mention that just as a random person that uses social media, I've seen videos where vendors have had a lot of their, inventory just thrown away, and we see how the community reacts. The community is in shock, and they view it as an act of violence almost. Can you talk about what that is like for somebody, as you mentioned, who that may be their entire livelihood?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's always so frustrating because I think people in communities tend to love their local street vendors, right? They love the people who they know, who they recognize, are always out on the corner, always selling, especially general merchandise products, right? General merchandise vendors. But for someone to lose all of their merchandise, that can often represent thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars that they've invested in acquiring the merchandise and getting ready to sell it, right? So it doesn't just hurt your business for a day, it hurts your business for like a month. So that becomes a really unfortunate and upsetting outcome if you're unlicensed or if you're unpermitted. You facing those shutdowns become really harmful to you and to your family as well.
Yeah, I wonder, are there any things in place to help these vendors when it comes to permits and licensing?
So when it comes to licensing for mobile food vendors, absolutely, the Street Vendors Project does help street vendors with this. With permits, unfortunately, the only thing that we can do is ask City Council to remove these permits, right? To change the system to make it a little bit more equitable so that everybody has access to free and full participation in an industry that already exists, that already operates at a high level, and that we know isn't necessarily going to compete with with like brick and mortar restaurants and vendors. We know that everybody can coexist happily. It's just that we have this unnecessary boundary or hurdle that keeps some people in a lesser position.
Now, I also want to take the moment to highlight that your study also states that women play a big role as vendors, with 48% of all vendors being women, yet they're less likely to have permits or licenses. Why is that? And I also want to add that sometimes we'll see these women with their children, so they're definitely working hard, and they're trying to provide for their family, but unfortunately, they are also the victims of the vendors that kind of get their stuff thrown away. So, why are we seeing women not have the same access?
So I think that's a really great question. Part of it, there's a lot of different aspects to this. One part is that women are much more often newer to the street vendor industry. So because they're new and because the permits are capped, they're far less likely to get a permit, right? It also has to do with some of the products that they're selling. You even mentioned seeing women with their kids selling cut fruit. This is incredibly common. However, because they're not doing it from like a mobile truck, or they're not doing it in this sort of controlled environment, so many times they're like on the subway platform, they're in front of the park, it does make it a little bit harder to get a license. So is a good example of a group of people who we want to be doing what they're doing, because we all like, who doesn't love a cut mango in the summertime, like with a little tahini on it? Who doesn't want that? So you have to, this is a group of people who's providing a service that we want. We just need to protect them in more formalized ways.
Now, with that, where can street vendors, because so many people know street vendors, or, are related to street vendors, where can people go to kind of help those who kind of want to continue this business? And then where can people go to learn more about the survey?
Absolutely. So to learn more about the survey, you can go onto our website, immresearch.org. That's immresearch.org. And you can read the full report, which has a really good accounting of everything that we found. And I also have to mention that a lot of the work was done by my colleague, Shamir Settle, who unfortunately couldn't be here today because she's on maternity leave, because she just had a baby, and the baby's so cute. But we... the website.
So
the website, that was the website. And we also, if you want to learn more about helping street vendors, I strongly suggest going to the Street Vendors Project, which has been doing advocacy for street vendors for more than 20 years.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for, joining us here at BronxNet and talking a little bit more about this, because it's definitely something that I've seen in my community and across New York City. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you would like to learn more about the report, please go to our website at immresearch.org and click on the Publications tab. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us, and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you miss any part of today's show, you can catch the Recablecast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Hymie on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.